And from a writer's perspective, what were you doing to attract intelligent viewers?
Writing intelligent stories. I'm sorry. That's what we did on Star Trek. We weren't going to write science fiction trash. We had usually strong women most of the time. We had really good actors who were involved in good stories. We got the best writers we could. We made the best scripts we could. People said, did you know you were building a legend? No, of course not. We were just trying to do a darn good show. And that's what we did all the time. You occasionally get one that didn't work as well as others, but we had a lot of really good shows. And we kept it up for 3 years. After that Friday night slot was killing us, and NBC said goodbye. But I do remember at the end of the second season, I'm pretty sure this is right, yeah, Lyndon B. Johnson came on the air, made an announcement that he was not going to seek office, he was not going to run, etc. And then as soon as that announcement went off the air, and a voiceover announcement came on saying, Star Trek will return next year, which means please don't send us any more of those damn letters. Because when Star Trek was threatened with cancellation at the end of the first season, we got more mail than ever. Not we, NBC got more mail than ever saying, don't do this. And there was a march on NBC from college students, from Cal Poly, in fact. They marched through the NBC parking lot slapping stickers of Save Star Trek on every car they could find. That we didn't do that. Those people, the fans, did that.
Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on December the 6th, 2019, and is current through the Star Trek Short Trek episode Ask Not, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a 30-minute news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 5 television shows in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me, and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone, and my guest this week is Shannon Fauver. Shannon, welcome to WeeklyTrek.
Hi.
Shannon, I ask my guests this question every week. I'd like to know something that's got you excited about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
Well, actually, the people of Star Trek, like the other fans, always get me excited about Star Trek. Like, someone saw my little free library. Do you know what that is?
No, tell me more.
Okay, a little free library is where you put like a little book repository in front of your business or your house. Take books, leave books. So mine is a Delta. I had it commissioned with the yellow Star Trek Delta, and somebody saw that, and then they brought me the Wrath of Khan 2 album today, just because.
That's very cool.
So stuff like that, like Trekkies are just like, I could talk to anybody about Star Trek, and that's all the common ground you need for people.
So you've been enjoying listening to the soundtrack to the Wrath of Khan today, I assume?
I just got back from court a little while ago, so not yet, probably tomorrow.
Very cool, very cool. So mine is actually Star Trek music related as well, in a way. I finally got a theory right. In last week's episode, I was talking about how my theory for the week was that I thought that for Black Friday, that La La Land Records would be releasing Star Trek Voyager Volume 2, and it turned out I was right. They did announce that the second set in the Star Trek Voyager soundtrack collection series was being released for Black Friday, so it's now available to order at lalalandrecords.com. Begins shipping December 10th. You can purchase it now for $59.98. So I am patting myself on the back for a very rare correct theory this week, and also really looking forward to some Star Trek Voyager music.
Good job.
Are you a music fan, Shannon?
I am, and actually, one of the highlights of the Star Trek convention is actually the music videos that the fans put together, which I love. Those are great. I always go in and watch them when they're on the screen.
Yes, the creativity that people show, sort of matching the songs to the video clips, is often very fun. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
So our first story this week is a somber one. Dorothy Dc Fontana, known to many a Star Trek fan for her significant contributions to the franchise, passed away this week at the age of 80 after a short illness. Dorothy was a prolific television writer, including having written a number of episodes for the original series, for The Next Generation, and one episode of Deep Space Nine. She was script consultant for part of the original series' first season and all of the second season. She was effectively the showrunner of Star Trek The Animated Series, and she was also part of the team that created Star Trek The Next Generation and co-wrote the series pilot Encounter at Farpoint. It's not too much of an exaggeration to say that without Dorothy Fontana, Star Trek would not be what it is today. I mean, she is responsible for a number of really significant additions to the Trek canon, like the episode Journey to Babel, like Sarek, like Amanda, like the Tellarites, the Andorians, on and on and on, having been part of that original team. Responsible for creating The Next Generation. Her fingerprints are all over that show as well. Most recently, she was a senior lecturer at the American Film Institute, and this has been another sad week for the Star Trek fan community. Shannon, Dorothy was quite the figure, don't you think?
Yes, and I've always been very impressed with her, because it didn't occur to me that women weren't accepted as writers at that point, but since she had to use her initials so people didn't know she's a woman at the time, that says a lot about that. But I don't care if she's a man or woman, with her contribution to Star Trek, she was always doing a great job.
Yeah, incredible. It's funny, even this week with her passing, people are still sort of finding out for the first time that DC Fontana, which is the not quite pen name, because those are her initials, and her last name that she used on the show, was in fact a woman and not a man. I was listening to an interview she gave with the Writers Guild of America, and she was explaining how at some point in her career, she'd actually started off, her first couple of television script sales had been under her full first name. But starting shortly before she started working on Star Trek, she switched it to DC Fontana because it was easier for her to get the producers interested and want to meet with her and then be surprised she was a woman when they got there, than for her never to get that meeting in the first place, which is, sort of a sad condemnation of 1960s television. And fingers crossed, we're a bit further along from that today.
Now, I also enjoy the Deep Space Nine episode where Sisko thought he was a writer back then, and they had Kira playing a female writer that had to use her initials to get hired.
That's right.
Which I'm guessing was an homage to this.
I believe it was, yeah. KC Hunter was the character's name, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, and they're doing it's the author photos, and
she couldn't be in it.
Yeah, that's right.
And I just saw the episode last week, actually.
Oh, yeah. I turned on Journey to Babel last night, which is the first time I've watched that episode in probably a couple of years. And, it is funny how much an episode like that has entirely sort of kind of helped set up and characterize what the Star Trek universe would become. I mean, just in that one episode alone, there are so many elements that are so important to the later Star Trek canon, like these major races of the Federation, like Spock's parents being introduced for the first time. So clearly Dorothy Fontana's contributions to the franchise cannot be overstated. So our thoughts and best wishes go out to the family of DC Fontana. But turning from sad news to slightly happier news, it looks like the Star Trek movies might be back on track, and we might have news on a potential Star Trek 4 in the Kelvin timeline on the way. So this comes from a report by Deadline Hollywood, which came out just before Thanksgiving. We didn't get to it in the last episode, so we're going to talk about it now. The report says that Noah Hawley, who created and was the showrunner for the TV show Legion, and also was the showrunner for the Fargo TV series, was in advanced talks to both write and direct a next Star Trek movie. Which is a significant advancement from where we thought we were with Star Trek 4 up to this point. So this is separate from the Quentin Tarantino Star Trek movie that continues to be talked about. This is the movie that was supposed to come after Star Trek Beyond. Initially, they had said the movie was going to feature the return of Chris Hemsworth as Kirk's father. They'd had a director in place, S.J. Clarkson. It seemed like they had a script. And then the movie seemed to fall apart due to some contractual dispute between Chris Pine, who plays Captain Kirk, and Chris Hemsworth, who were not sort of willing to sign their contracts to appear in the movie. The reported reason was because of differences over money. Since that point, which was now almost a year ago, we've not heard anything about Star Trek 4. Other than that, it sounded like the movie had been shelved. S.J. Clarkson moved on to a different project. But the fact that Noah Hawley is attached to Star Trek 4 is really the only thing that we know about this movie. And it seems very likely that it would feature a return of the Kelvin timeline cast. But beyond that, we don't know anything else. Is this still a vehicle for the return of Chris Hemsworth as George Kirk, or is it going to adopt an entirely new and different story? Have the issues been worked out with Chris Pine so that he can reappear as Captain Kirk? All of this we don't know yet, and we don't even know for sure that Hawley will be writing and directing the film. This was not an official press release. It was just a news story, though one that was picked up by a number of different outlets and seemed to imply that it was more or less a done deal. Shannon, how do you feel about the Kelvin timeline movies? Are you looking forward to a fourth?
Yes, but there are two things. My first two thoughts when I saw that this was coming was that the one with the whales, I'm like, are they doing the one with the whales in the Kelvin timeline because that's what it's known as?
Yeah, right.
And then I'm like, I'm so happy Tarantino's not doing it, because for me, I don't like his movies. I would still watch it because it would be Star Trek, but I would not probably enjoy it because he's just not my choice. So I'm very glad that if it comes out, he will not be running this one. Again, I will watch anything that has Star Trek on it, but it's not my choice.
Yeah, I guess there's still a possibility that this Quentin Tarantino Star Trek movie will happen, because it seems like a separate project from this kind of mainline Star Trek 4. But at the same time, I mean, at this point, it's sort of do it or don't do it, right? I mean,
right.
Stop just keep dangling it over our heads as a possibility. Either commit to it or walk away. But I will admit, I agree with you. I'm much more excited by the prospect of a Star Trek 4 than I am by the prospect of a Quentin Tarantino Star Trek movie. That's never been something that's particularly excited me. But I really liked Star Trek Beyond, and I would really like to sort of continue the story of those characters. The only thing that gives me pause is Noah Hawley's made some great TV shows. I don't know if you've seen either Legion or Fargo, but they're very good TV shows. The only bad thing is he released his first movie this year, Lucy in the Sky, and it was something of a critical and commercial failure. Yeah. And it is a shame that Star Trek was poised to have its first female director of a feature film, and now it seems like that isn't going to be the case.
Well, hopefully it'll go well, because they always talk about the next Star Trek movie. If it goes badly, then there won't be another one. Of course, that hasn't happened yet. Even the ones that haven't done well, we still have Star Trek.
Are there any particular kind of themes or ideas or things from the previous movies that you would like to see explored in more detail in a possible Star Trek 4?
I would like to see Spock and Uhura's relationship continue, especially once she finds out that he tagged her with a necklace. She probably will not be happy about that.
Yeah, right.
Because who would be? And I also hope they bring Jayla back, because Jayla is one of my favorite characters in the Kelvin timeline.
She was a really great addition to the cast. I mean, a breath of fresh air in terms of adding a new and diverse perspective to these characters. I mean, that was one of the best things about Star Trek Beyond, in my opinion, was that character.
So she's also my first cosplay I ever tried.
Oh, that's great.
She was awesome. Yeah.
So you did the full face paint and everything?
Yeah, it wasn't really good, because it was my first time. So I ended up telling people I was Jayla and Scotty's daughter, because I couldn't get the makeup right.
Hey, it's the thought that counts, right? It's not so much the execution.
I tried.
Exactly. So we will wait for more news on that. I mean, we're in a better position today than we were a month ago as it relates to another Star Trek movie, because it does seem like there is something in the works, and we'll just kind of wait and see what that is and how it materializes. And it comes at an interesting time because, and this moves us into our next news story, the merger between CBS and Viacom has finished this week. Yes, CBS and Viacom are two separate companies no more, and ViacomCBS is now the combined entity between them. The merger was initially announced 4 months ago, and it's now fully complete. The company is now trading on the stock market as ViacomCBS. I think when we'd first talked about this on the show, I had said something about how I thought it would take quite a while for the merger to move through. It seems like it actually moved a lot faster because the federal government decided not to sort of step in and review the merger. They seemed to let it pass, so everything went through very quickly. But even though the merger itself was completed very fast, I think it will still take quite a bit of time for the two companies to figure out not just merging in name only, but also merging in fact. And that includes reuniting the two sort of separate halves of the Star Trek franchise, the movie production that's under Paramount Pictures and the television production that's under CBS. So, this Star Trek 4 announcement, even though there technically is no longer a need for the Kelvin timeline because there's no longer the sorts of legal issues associated with the Star Trek intellectual property and who owns what, and that's all now back under one company. They have access to all of it. There's still, I think, going to be a push towards sort of doing something. And right now, the easiest thing to do is probably just to continue the Kelvin timeline series of movies for Paramount, since all of that infrastructure is already in place, rather than figuring out some way of doing another prime timeline movie. But Shannon, everything's now back under one house. Presumably we'll see some changes play themselves out in the future, but we don't know what they are yet. How are you feeling about that?
I think it's great because I've always had to explain to people why there were two different timelines because it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right.
And I've always assumed that's why there's not as many like Star Trek products as Star Wars products, is because who wants to sell something or promote something that helps the other company? So hopefully there'll be more Star Trek stuff we can have. Like when I go to the store, I can buy a Star Trek ornament at the store like I can in the other universe.
Right.
How they merge them together. I'm assuming at some point they will merge them together, but I'm not sure when. That could be like Star Trek 10.
Yeah, it could be. Are there any, so now they can use the TV content on the movie screen. I mean, this is all just like total hypothetical. Is there anything from the most recent line of TV shows that you think you would like to see pop up on the big screen?
Well, I really enjoy Discovery, but I don't know how they would fit that in because they would have to go backwards, just like Discovery's fit backwards in timeline that we've been doing. So I don't know if they could do that in the movies.
I guess that is true.
I am watching all the Star Trek in Stardate order, so I hopefully will be caught up by the time Picard comes on.
Where are you up to?
I am getting ready to start the third season of Voyager.
Oh, yeah, that's not too far to go then if you're doing it in Stardate order, because that means you just have Voyager and Nemesis to go, right?
And actually, I breezed through the movies because I've seen them enough times, but I would probably watch Nemesis right before Picard. But I actually started this like a year and a half ago without knowing Picard was coming on. I was like, I've been a fan my entire life. I probably should catch all the episodes as they were intended in order. Luckily, it just happened that Picard's coming out soon.
Certainly gives a good deadline to work towards, right?
Yes. There's more binging now. Before it was like one episode at a time. Last couple weeks, I'm like 3 episodes a night trying to get caught up. So.
Yeah. How many episodes do you think you have to do a day to get across the finish line?
I don't know. Like, so I'm doing about 3 right now, and that's about all I can watch. And not because I don't love it, because I want to enjoy it. Yeah. And I've also been tweeting about it the entire year and a half I've been doing it, basically. But it's just more entertaining this way. And also, since I'm watching them all together, I catch the fact like Aaron Eisenberg was just on an episode of Voyager, which I did not realize when I saw it the first time. The first thing he said was Federation. I'm like, wait, I know who that is.
You probably can do it in time because we are now, as of the day of recording, we are 48 days away from the premiere of Star Trek Picard.
You're right. I should make it then.
If you're on the 3rd season of Voyager, because I was trying to figure out if you were going to watch the whole of The Next Generation starting yesterday, you would have to watch 1 season per week. But if you're already 3 seasons in, then...
The Voyager, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're going to do a season in a week, that's about 4 episodes per day. But if you're already a full 2 seasons in, then at 3 episodes a day, you probably will make it.
Great. Because when I started last year, after I started, I'm like, oh my God, that's like 700 hours of TV plus the movies.
Yeah. That's a lot of content.
Yes, but I am, like I said, I'm getting more flavor of Star Trek than I had before.
And what better way to set yourself up for going into the next phase of Star Trek?
Yay.
Well, the last thing to say about the CBS-Viacom merger, or ViacomCBS as it's now known, is while I was saying that it will probably take a while for the implications for the Star Trek franchise to work themselves out. Some of the initial implications for CBS All Access have already manifested themselves. In the last 2 weeks, the Nickelodeon library has made an appearance on CBS All Access, Nickelodeon having been owned under the Viacom section of the company. And so I wonder if the Star Trek movies, which are part of Paramount Pictures, owned by Viacom, are not too far behind on CBS All Access. They are noticeably missing because of the split between the companies, but now that split doesn't exist anymore, and we've already seen some crossover in the corporate content available on CBS All Access. It strikes me that it's probably only a matter of time before the movies make their way onto the service as well.
And it is well worth $5.95 a month.
Yes. So our last story this week is an update on the Section 31 show. So we got a small update via a Vanity Fair interview with Alex Kurtzman and Julie McNamara, the head of CBS All Access. They were talking about the plan to roll out all of this Star Trek content onto CBS All Access, how it was one of the tentpole franchises for the streaming service. And there was not a huge amount of news except about the Section 31 show, which we really have not heard all that much about since the show was announced now nearly a year ago. Alex Kurtzman was talking about the show, and he said Erica Lippold and Bo-Young Kim, who are the showrunners on the show, have started writing a pilot, and it's really different. It occupies an area of the Trek universe that's never really been explored geographically. It has a new mythology to it, which is very interesting, and it puts Michelle Yeoh's character, Philippa Georgiou, who's going to be the main character on this Section 31 show, to the test in a lot of ways that Discovery can't. In some ways, he says, it will be her Unforgiven, I would say. Unforgiven being a reference to the early 90s Clint Eastwood movie in which he plays a criminal who comes out of retirement to stop a pair of other dangerous criminals. So I think you could probably pick up from that what the kind of idea and theme behind the Section 31 show is. The other small piece of news we got was from Julie McNamara, who said that there is a writer's room for the show and that the scripts are being written. So it does seem like we are well past just the pilot phase for Section 31, that they are in the script development and writing phase for other episodes as well. So fingers crossed, now with it having been a year, with Discovery Season 3 most of the way through filming, and the expectation being that the Section 31 show would film after Discovery Season 3's filming had wrapped, that we will start to learn a bit more about the show in the near future. But Shannon, are you liking what you're hearing right now, or how are you feeling about the Section 31 show? I know there's a lot of diverse opinions out there in the fan community.
Well, it's one of the things is, our version of Star Trek has always been a cleaner version. Like, it's not the ugliness. But like I said, after watching all the shows in order, it didn't start that way. Like, Enterprise was pre-Federation, and it wasn't what we think of a Federation. Like, they lie, they steal, they cheat sometimes. And then my 15-year-old who just started watching Star Trek pointed out that they weren't the Federation yet. So it makes sense that there's still some remnants of not the happy part of what we want to be out there. So that's what Section 31 represents to me, is the darker side of what we do sometimes to get what we want, I guess.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about this one. I mean, Michelle Yeoh is an incredible actress. Awesome. I've enjoyed every single one of her appearances on Star Trek Discovery. I'm so happy that she is sort of part of this franchise and has a role in it. Bowie and Erica are really good Star Trek writers who've written some fabulous, fabulous episodes. Into the Forest I Go, which was the mid-season finale for Star Trek Discovery Season 1, is one of the best episodes of the show thus far. And also Through the Valley of Shadows, which they wrote, was one of the best episodes of Season 2. And so, there's obviously a lot of talent behind this idea. I just don't know about the idea of focusing a show on this amoral organization. So having said all those fabulous things about Michelle Yeoh, one of the things that leaves a bad taste in my mouth is that they've never really dealt with the implications that this is a character who herself has committed terrible crimes. It's either sort of been laughed off as played as a joke or just sort of skirted around. So I really hope that, this show will sort of grapple with that much more head on and really give us that kind of Star Trek level examination of what does it mean to be this kind of person, right? Who has committed all of these crimes, but maybe now is getting exposed to a different way of life. And perhaps it's rubbing off on them a little bit. I think it needs to kind of seriously examine those ideas in order for it to hold up. Otherwise, it feels a little hollow to me. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think right now the only redeeming quality they've given her was her relationship to Burnham. Even though she knew it wasn't her Burnham,
right,
she still cared about her and didn't want to do anything to hurt her. So maybe that'll be part of it. But of course, Burnham is not missing.
Right.
For us. But because I was wondering, it would be interesting to me if they put Ash on that show. Of course, that depends on where he is after the next season of Discovery, because he's trying to be a good person. He just doesn't know what that is and I never thought his Klingon character was bad. I don't mean it like that, but because he has two different histories, he's not sure where he is. It'd be kind of interesting to see how they handled him, throwing him into a organization that is immoral, and see what happens to him.
Yeah. I mean, tough to judge at this point, right? We know so little about the show. We know so little about what it's going to be. It could be all of those things. It could be none of those things. I guess we'll just wait and see. I am certainly open to being swayed by a great execution. It's just, of all the shows they have announced thus far, this is the one that I have the most conflicted feelings about. There is lots of things that I'm really looking forward to about it, like a Star Trek vehicle for Michelle Yeoh, and there are lots of things that I'm really reticent about, like it being another Section 31 focused sort of story.
Also, I thought it was funny when they label it as Unforgiven, because that Clint Eastwood was, the original Western, and Star Trek was the Western in space.
Right.
So they've kind of come back to that.
All right. Well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, I and my guest give you a wish or a theory we're nurturing about Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, any of the shows, or the future of the franchise as a whole. So Shannon, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
Well, I actually wish that they would tie the fact that the Doctor on Voyager could walk around and that kind of thing, and at one point he was alone on the ship, into the fact that we now have a sentient ship 1,000 years in the future.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, because I just watched that episode, and that reminded me of that, where the ship is talking back to him. So he basically was the ship, and I thought that would be interesting to tie it into that. Went on to become what was later a sentient ship, because he was the first hologram that could walk around and interact with everybody.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. The Star Trek franchise has sort of done a lot to kind of develop this idea of artificial intelligences and sort of keep pushing them to the next level. So you had, the Doctor, take it all the way back. You had the M5 in the Ultimate Computer in the original series, the murderous AI, and then you've got the Doctor. And then in the short Trek Calypso, you've got Zora, this sort of sentient personality for the whole ship. So you would like to see the Doctor become a sort of larger AI. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. And of course, that's an excuse to bring Picardo back, which is always fun.
Well, he did say that he has been approached about appearing in Star Trek Picard Season 2.
That I did not know. So thank you.
He was talking about it at a convention this summer, about how his agent had gotten a call from someone on the production about whether he would be interested in making another appearance. Oh, he definitely said yes. Whether it will happen or not, who knows? But certainly is an interesting idea. Well, that is a very cool idea. So my theory this week relates to a little subliminal messaging that you will have been seeing if you have been watching CBS at any point in the last week. I don't know if you've noticed, Shannon, but at the end of, if you're just kind of got CBS on and you're just watching sort of regular television, at the end of many of these commercials for CBS TV shows, they show you these little quick flashes of the Starfleet Delta.
Really?
Yeah, people first started noticing it in Sunday Night Football this past Sunday, that when they went to commercial break, they would kind of flash a little delta across the screen. I think that they are starting to significantly ramp up their advertising campaign for the premiere of Star Trek Picard.
Yes, because they want you to join CBS All Access.
Exactly. And that this is sort of the first step in a much larger advertising rollout over the next month. Because as I said before, we're now only 48 days away from the premiere of Picard, and it will be here before we know it.
I bet that they release the first one on regular CBS like they did with Discovery, and then they'll kick it over to CBS All Access so that it gets more people to watch it.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. It feels like if they were going to do that, they would have announced it by now. But at the same time, it seems like such a good opportunity not to pass it up. I mean, there's so much interest around Picard. I would say Discovery is a show that many people like. I am one of them. But because it was a new Star Trek that focused on entirely new characters, when it first premiered, it didn't have the same cachet that something like Patrick Stewart returning to his role as Jean-Luc Picard, this cultural phenomenon from the 1990s, has. And so it does seem like, from a CBS perspective, there is a lot of impetus for them to put that first episode on regular television to suck people in and get them to sign up for the streaming service. But it's interesting that they've not announced that yet. You would have thought that's something that they would have done by now. But maybe this sort of subliminal messaging, the little deltas thing, is a way of building up to that.
Or maybe somebody will hear this and then suggest it to them.
Exactly. And if that happens, they can send me a big fat check. Or I guess it was your idea. They can send you a big fat check.
Hey, I would be happy with whichever. You know, if I could, actually, I would like to go to the premiere. If they do that, I would like to go to the premiere wherever they're doing that, and that would be good.
Yeah, and that's another thing. We've not heard anything yet about a premiere. Star Trek Discovery Seasons 1 and 2 both had premiere events. I would be shocked if Star Trek Picard didn't have one sort of a week before the show premiered. So I think there's still things we are bound to learn about this show before it comes out in now only a short 48 days.
Yay.
Do you have a theory or wish for Discovery Picard or the future of the franchise that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of WeeklyTrek. Thank you so much to my guest, Shannon Fauver, for joining me today. Shannon, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
Well, my Twitter is Fauver Law, because I'm a lawyer. So, of course, that means they're going to get law stuff and Trek stuff. But that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. Very cool. And you can find this show on Twitter at WeeklyTrek and me at Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, thank you, Shannon. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.